was a software development engineer on the release platform team at a gaming company. We supported 18 game service teams that deployed independently, but every release needed evidence from security scans, integration tests, change approval, and service ownership. The process had become complex because those checks lived in 4 systems owned by different teams. Release engineers copied identifiers between them and maintained a large orchestration service with more than 60 conditional steps. A small policy change often required code in several branches. Deployments waited an average of 90 minutes for checks that had usually finished, and the orchestration service caused about 6 failed releases a week. My initial assignment was to add another approval rule before a seasonal launch. When I traced the flow, I realized adding a 61st condition would deepen the problem. The complexity wasn't the checks themselves, it was our attempt to encode every team's workflow centrally. I proposed a simpler model. Each check would publish one signed result with the same 4 fields: release identifier, control name, outcome, and expiry time. The release platform would only answer one question: are all controls required for this service present, current, and passing? I set a target to cut median approval wait below 20 minutes, reduce orchestration failures by at least half, and let a policy change be configured without editing the deployment engine. I considered buying a workflow product, rebuilding the orchestrator, or standardizing the interface. A product introduced migration and licensing work while leaving our inconsistent inputs untouched. A rebuild still required central knowledge of every branch. The common result contract removed that knowledge, so I chose it even though it required influence across 4 owning teams. To test whether 4 fields were enough, I sampled 80 recent releases and mapped every decision back to its minimum evidence. 2 edge cases needed more context: emergency changes and controls that applied only to customer data services. Instead of adding new workflow branches, I put those requirements in a small service policy document. The evaluator read the policy, matched it against published results, and returned missing or expired controls. The security team objected because their scan system could not sign results. I first suggested that they change their producer, but that would have delayed us by a quarter. I changed tack and built a thin adapter at our boundary. It converted their existing callback, signed it with a platform identity, and kept the security system unchanged. I documented the adapter as temporary and gave the team a migration date. My first prototype also stored every result in a new database. During load testing, that database became the bottleneck I was supposedly removing. I simplified again. Results were short-lived facts, so I used the event log we already operated and materialized only the current status in a small cache. If the cache was unavailable, deployment failed closed and showed which evidence could not be verified. I ran the new evaluator alongside the old orchestrator for 2 weeks. For 1,126 releases, both made the same final decision except for 7 cases. 5 were expired security results that the old flow had incorrectly reused, and 2 exposed unclear emergency policy. I corrected the policy with security and operations, then required 1 week of 0 unexplained differences before cutover. I also checked that we hadn't merely moved complexity into configuration. I asked 2 engineers who had never seen the design to add a temporary control from written instructions. Both completed it without platform team help. We added schema validation, named policy owners, and a preview showing the exact controls a release would require before anyone changed production configuration. After launch, median approval wait fell from 90 minutes to 14. Orchestration-related failed releases dropped from about 6 a week to fewer than 1. The seasonal approval rule was added as a policy entry in under an hour, rather than a multi-service code change, and 3 teams adopted the result contract for their own internal gates and future policy changes. The lesson for me was that simplification often comes from removing knowledge from the center, not rewriting the center more neatly. Since then, when a coordinator becomes complicated, I first ask which decisions can be expressed as stable contracts at the edges.